Good evening. For some, this is the start of a very wonderful experience. For others, this will be just another experience. For still others, it will prove to be the most sacred and most important event that has ever taken place in their lives up to this moment. In opening this work in Seattle, October 1956, I must tell you that our closed classwork began here in this very room after it had been inaugurated only in Los Angeles, Desert Hot Springs, San Francisco, Portland, and Vancouver, B.C. Those were the only cities in the United States or Canada that had ever had closed classwork until that time when it was held here. And at that time, I am sure that not one of us knew that the Infinite Way was to become a world activity, a recognized spiritual activity, respected and in some cases wonderfully demonstrated in many parts of the world. I'm very happy about that particular point because it indicates that neither I nor anyone else had any idea of creating a new religion or of saving the world or of doing any other thing than finding our own inner peace and having a desire to share it with anyone who might like to hear about it. And so there was none of the save the world attitude about it. There was no attitude that this is the only way or the only teaching or the only God. It was actually just the result of a personal experience of my own, in which I learned that through meditation we could make contact with our own inner source, which is God, our own inner being, or our own inner self, and then be God-governed, not by virtue of our own wisdom or strength, but by virtue of the fact that now the divinity within us was given the opportunity to come into expression. While at that time I didn't know it, had never consciously realized it, what I had discovered was probably the secret of the Master's teaching in the 15th chapter of John, wherein he revealed that the vine, or Christ, or spiritual Son, is within us, and that it is forever at one with the Godhead. And therefore our relationship to God is very much like the relationship of the branch of a tree to the tree, which in turn through its root system is connected with the whole world. Now if you can just visualize for a moment what takes place beneath the earth, you'll see the importance of this. Here is a tree rooted and grounded in the earth. In the earth are vegetables, minerals, metals, vitamins, calories, or whatever. And the tree has need of these. The fruit trees have need of one form of food, and citrus fruits have need of another form. Vegetables have need of still another form. Flowers have need of still other forms of food, life, which is found in the earth and which is continuously being replaced there by the action of the sun and the rain, the snow. But through this system of roots in the trunk of the tree, the vine, this food is drawn up into the tree and then distributed out into the branches. And because of that, the branches ultimately have leaves, blossoms, and then finally fruit. Now, if one of those branches should become severed from the vine or trunk of the tree, it would have no further access to all of these riches which are down in the ground, the minerals and the foodstuffs, the supply which is inherent in the earth. And so the branch would wither, and it would die, be cast into the furnace, and that would be the end of the branch. So the Master tells us that we are the branches, but that within us is something called I. I am the vine. Just silently within yourself think of that word I, or declare it within yourself now, I. And remember that the Master said that that I is the vine that is connected with God. That is the I that he spoke of when he said, I and the Father are one. And when you say I inside yourself, remember, that is the part of you that is one with God. And as long as you consciously remember that that I within you is consciously one with God, all the food, all the substance, all the wisdom, knowledge, intelligence, virtues, powers, vitalities, immortalities, that is the nature of God, is pouring through this I, which you now are declaring, and it is coming right out here into your body. It is producing the health of your body, the wisdom of your mind, the guidance, the virtues, the benevolence. Whatever there is of good about you is flowing to you from the Godhead through this I which you've just announced. Without the knowledge of this, you are as a branch that is cut off, and you'll probably go through your 80 years and 10, some less than that, and some now, by the grace of Materia Medica, may last even longer. But it will be a physical life, and it will have an ending, and even that physical life will not be lived in the fullness of joy. Why? No one can ever attain joy from an external circumstance, condition, or person. Once you understand how to enjoy life, you can derive a great deal of joy through your associations with your family, with your friends, with your church members, your neighbors, the citizens of the world, through them, but not from them. Because it is the nature of the human that regardless of what it is in the world that he believes would give him pleasure, the moment he has it, the pleasure begins to fade. A person longs all their life for a diamond and then receives it, and then finds out that it isn't so wonderful after all. Doesn't probably realize it. The reason is the neighbor has one twice as big. And so it is. You've seen examples in the newspapers of how hundreds of men spend millions of dollars trying to gain one of our Hollywood stars, all for himself. In their youthfulness and beauty, they're certainly attractive, and what happens afterward? You know what happens. A Hollywood divorce. Why? Because no one is quite as attractive as they seem to be while you haven't got them. And so it is that the attaining of a person or the attaining of a thing, even to the extent of attaining $1 million, isn't really what it seems and never has satisfied anyone, unless there were something that went along with the attaining that changed the picture. Ah, yes. If we meet each other, boy meets girl and vice versa, and they find some qualities that attract them to each other, and they marry, that is no longer possession, that is union. And therefore, it is possible to find happiness, contentment, permanence in marriage, not by virtue of possessing each other, but by possession of the union of these qualities which unite with each other. Now here was what I learned without knowing that it was the 15th chapter of John. I learned that whatever joy had come to me through business success or the income that went with it, whatever joy came to me through friendships or family relationships, really and truly wasn't satisfying. There was still an ache and a void within me. Humanly, I had more than most people, but inwardly I had less than I believed others had. Since then, I know that nearly everyone has the same ache, the same void within them, regardless of what they possess in the outer sense. It took many, many years of study, revelation, unfoldment, before I discovered that hollow that I had inside of me, that aching void, was a desire for God and a need for God, and that nothing was ever going to fulfill it until I found God. And since I have found conscious oneness with God, conscious union with God, regardless of the fact that I have had problems in the outer, I have never been separated from my good, never been separated from that joy which no man can take from me, no circumstance can take from me, no outer problem can take from me, because always I can retire into that inner part of my own being and commune. Now, having discovered something of that, it seemed that it set me apart from the world, and that I would live the rest of my days separate and apart from the world, except that I would continue to do the healing work which I loved. But that wasn't to be, because as soon as someone got to know me, they felt that I had something, and they wanted some of it, and I was willing to share it. That which I had, I still have, and that is this conscious union with God. That is what you feel. That is what has drawn you here to this classwork. It isn't anything that is in print. It is something you feel when you get to know me, even if you only get to know me impersonally from a platform. You feel it. And that's what you feel. It's no personal virtue. It's no personal goodness. Humanly, I have nothing that the world has ever wanted. But this inner contact has produced something that does something in my life and becomes evident to others, and whether or not you know it, it has drawn you here to partake of it. Now then, something of this I knew when that first class work was held here in Seattle. And part of it I was beginning to suspect, but truly I had no knowledge of its worldwide import, probably because I didn't know that whereas the whole world seemed to be seeking for peace and prosperity and health, even if it got all those, it still wouldn't be happy. It would have to have this union with God to complete it. And so, while the world was madly seeking health by any means it could get it, and wealth and peace on earth, I learned that that is not what it was seeking or what would satisfy it if it got it. What they were seeking was the kingdom of God, the realm of God, the realization of God. And I knew that nobody was going to be happy with their health or their wealth or their peace on earth until they had it. And in that knowledge, the demands came from other cities, other places, and finally foreign countries, until this word has spread around the entire Protestant world. Now, you can understand that a principle like this, being a universal one, if it is attractive to you and if it fulfills something in you, must of necessity be desired throughout the world, and therefore it could never be possible for any one man to satisfy the demands around the world for such a message. Even with all the books that we have written, even with the grace of God, which has published these books in the English, in American editions, British editions, Holland, Dutch, German, now going into the Danish, and still further within a short time. No one can satisfy that, and so in each city there must be those equipped to carry on this work. And so it has been that in quite a few cities, some have developed capable of carrying it on. One of the qualifications necessary for carrying it on is spiritual healing. Some, against my advice, have attempted to carry on without the ability to heal and have found that it doesn't work. People aren't interested in a philosophy of words unless it can be backed with demonstration. And so it is those who have prospered in carrying on this work in other cities have prospered not because they have a message to tell about, they have a message to demonstrate. And by demonstrating it in their own experience, they are able to demonstrate it in the experience of others. And so it is that this work now must be carried on by those equipped, by those willing to devote themselves to that activity. I should have announced last night, but didn't remember it, because when I'm on a platform and the Spirit comes upon me, I forget everything else, and the message flows, and I'm very apt to let everything human go by the board. And that happened last night. I said that I would announce that the Infinite Way work is to be carried on here in Seattle, and carried on in a greater degree than ever before. Now, ever since the first class given here, the Infinite Way work has been carried on in the center. Now, however, it goes into a further step. There undoubtedly will be other Infinite Way activities in Seattle through the tape recording work. That will take care of itself and develop in according with its own unfoldment. But I want to tell you only of this public work, because Reverend Graham has become interested in this message. He is newer to this work than some, but he is more experienced in the public end of a metaphysical spiritual ministry. And therefore, as the associate minister of this center, will be equipped to see the work carried on here under his direction, together, of course, with the guidance of Mrs. Holmes, who is entirely responsible for the Infinite Way being a part of this center's work. There will be regular periods of tape recording work, night periods and day periods, conducted in regular class form. There will be several types of that work, and I understand that Mrs. Coe will continue in her class work here. Both Mrs. Holmes and Reverend Graham will act as spiritual healers and counselors, so that between Mrs. Holmes and Reverend Graham there should be a much greater activity than ever has been before, and conducted in the manner most conducive to its success. This means, of course, that there will be opportunities provided for appointments, personal counseling, teaching, instruction and meditation, and over and above all, spiritual healing work conducted. And so, between that and between the activity of Mrs. Peters and Mrs. Howe and whatever other activities may unfold in Seattle, I can say the work is established here. And those who desire it will find every opportunity provided for their spiritual unfoldment in accord with the Infinite Way teaching. This is already taking place in other cities. Now, you may ask what it is, why it is, that the Infinite Way stands as a teaching by itself. And I'm going to try to make that as clear as I can. First of all, it has relationship to what I said, that some of you are going to find that this is the most sacred and important week that has ever been in your lives up to this moment. To some of you, it is not going to be that at all. It's going to be just an experience. And I'm afraid that there are still others here who will find that they won't understand why they ever came here to begin with. That always happens. The reason is this. The Infinite Way is not organized, and there are no memberships, and no one can join it, and no one can be a part of it in any physical or human way. The only way that anyone unites with this work is spiritually. The only bond that exists between us is a spiritual bond. And now let me show you how that functions. Every truth student anywhere in the world, if they were sitting quietly by themselves asking, why am I a truth student, would at first say, well, I'm seeking health, or I'm seeking supply, or I'm seeking happiness. But if they were to just sit quietly long enough, one by one those reasons would be eliminated, because the question would come, does that mean if I get my health I wouldn't be a true student anymore? Or if I get my supply, will I stop being a truth student? Or if I find happiness, will I stop being a truth student? And the answer is no. If I found those things, through truth, I would be evermore a truth student. So that isn't the reason, then, that I have for being a truth student. Well, then what is the reason? Why, there can only be one reason. I'm seeking God. I'm seeking God. It so happens that living in countries like the United States and Canada, it is evident that the only ones who are on the way toward finding the God that everyone is seeking is in the truth movements. There's no other way in these two countries to find truth except to stay home and search within the kingdom of one's own self, because truth isn't being presented in any other forms. Rituals are, rites are, ceremonies are, creeds, dogma, but not truth, because in order to search for truth, you have to first of all agree that truth cannot be found in any limited form, or in any worship, or in any book, or in any man. And so one has to start out with the realization that to find truth, one has to be completely free of any such nonsensical belief that Christians have truth, or Hebrews have truth, or Mohammedans have truth. As religious organizations or teachings, that's partial. The kingdom of truth is within oneself, and in order to find it, one must find it. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't Christians who have found it, or Mohammedans, or Hebrews, for they have. Truth can be found while a member of any religion or of none. But merely being a part of a religion will certainly never reveal truth, because it isn't accomplished in that way. There must be complete freedom. No one has ever yet found freedom, found truth, while they had one iota of bigotry or bias or prejudice toward any religion or race or color. You see, truth cannot be found through such limited vision. One must have arisen to the place where they realize that truth is of God, and God existed before there ever existed a religious teaching. God existed before Abraham was, the father of the Hebrew race. God existed before the Aryans of India. God must have existed before there was a human being to seek or search for God. Once you perceive that, you will have started on the search for God. And that's what happens in truth. No one in truth makes any pretension of having discovered the only true God, or the only true way to be with God, or the only true way to be in God's care. No. In truth, it is recognized that no one is in God except the individual who has found himself there, regardless of what organization he may or not belong to. Now, we here then are truth students, and we are free. We belong to nothing. You, those of you who have not yet found the truth, who have not found your God, who have not found your conscious union with God, are still enjoying the freedom that permits you to seek any teacher, any teaching that may come to your attention which holds out promise of finding God. By virtue of being with us, even in this class, there are no restrictions, no ties, and you are free after this week to seek any book, any teacher, any teaching that you like. And probably with this added word of caution, when you do find your teacher or your teaching, give up all others and be as true to that teacher or teaching as you expect the teacher to be to you. The relationship that you expect from your teacher, that is complete and utter devotion to God and to you, that is what you must give to your teacher and your teaching. Abandoning all others, cling to this one as you do in marriage. Because having found your teacher or your teaching, you have found your life eternal. Now, you will still be a free agent. And it is for this reason that some, even after these classes, lose their way. Many people believe that living in the United States guarantees them their freedom. It does. It guarantees them the right to enjoy their freedom if they have the courage and if they have the wisdom to hold on to it. But it doesn't guarantee that they'll have it forever. No one can guarantee that, because in proportion as a citizenship becomes lax, there are always those to step in and take away those liberties and those freedoms that we're actually guaranteed in the Constitution, but which you couldn't have guaranteed in your life unless you stood valiantly at your polls and voted in such a way as to be sure that those freedoms would be maintained. No one can guarantee you, as American citizens, freedom except yourselves. And if you study the issues of your political life to such an extent and with such a clarity of thought that you can go to the polls and vote intelligently, that freedom will continue. And if not, be assured of this: if you allow the mesmerism of the press, of newspapers, of holy rollers or whatnot in the political field to sway your minds, it won't be too long till the freedoms which have been guaranteed you will be found missing. Some of us who've lived in the last 30 years have witnessed many of our freedoms taken away from us. Some we've regained, and some we probably never will regain because our carelessness was of too great an extent. Now with this also, you may find your God, you may find your truth through the infinite way, but no one can assure you that you will keep it. Lot's wife looked back. Someone else in Scripture sold their birthright for a mess of pottage. And there are always those who do not understand the true nature of freedom and how one must stand fast to hold it, who surrender themselves to the influence of others. And so it is, the Master warned against false teachers and false teachings. Nobody can tell you which they are. You yourself have to stand within yourself and measure everything that is offered to you against what you know to be demonstrable truth. So it is. If in the days to come you come to the realization that this is your way of life and it demonstrates itself for you, then it will be necessary for you to protect yourself from the world's influence by holding to it yourself. Even if we offered you a membership, it would be no guarantee that you wouldn't stray. It is you yourself, without human obligation, who must spiritually hold fast. Freedom is hard to win. It's much harder to retain. So I can say to you that your spiritual freedom is not easily attained. You will not easily find God. The way is straight and narrow, and few there be that find it. And when you do, that's when temptation comes at you twice as hard to lure you away. And no one can hold you fast in the line but yourself. There's one way that you can help yourself, and that is by being true. Be absolutely true to whatever teaching reveals itself to you as your teaching, and let no one tempt you with others. Let no one offer you or introduce to you any teaching but the very one. It need not necessarily be the infinite way. I speak now not as an infinite way teacher, I speak as a spiritual teacher. I do not care which teaching you follow. I say this to you, that you will not keep your spiritual freedom unless you stay true to the one that you discover to be yours. Now I come to one of the great benefits that come from this being true to the teaching that is yours. In coming into this closed class work, you are now a part of a united spiritual consciousness which circles this globe. At this present time, there are 24 hours in every day. There is not a single one of those hours in which there are not groups of infinite way students all around the globe in prayer for you. Just as when you complete this work, you will be in prayer for all these others. Now, you in the state of Washington may be in prayer at 6 a.m. or 12 o'clock noon or 12 o'clock midnight or 3 a.m. But remember this, that in Chicago there will be others at prayer at 7 a.m. and 1 p.m. and 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. And in New York, still an hour later. And in London, 3 hours later. And in Africa, 5 hours later, and so on. So that at no period of the day or night are you outside of the consciousness of infinite way prayer and treatment. At no time will you be outside of Christ realization. If you look at your watch at 10 a.m., remember there are people somewhere where it's 12 noon or 12 midnight praying at that very moment. If you look at your watch at 2 a.m., remember there are places where it's 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 noon, and someone is in prayer or treatment at that very moment. And not just one individual, but remember this, that if you were only to take this city, you would find that perhaps out of 24-hour period, there will be people in prayer 6 or 7 or 8 of those hours. And so it is in London, and so it is in South Africa, and so it is in Australia. There is now a spiritual band around this globe. There is, at this very second, people in 20 or 30 cities praying, holding us in conscious union with God. At this very second, there are those who are holding us in conscious communion with God. Whether or not they know, some know that we are in this class at this moment, and they are consciously holding us as a class in God consciousness. Others may not know what we are doing or anyone else is doing, but they are in prayer, in conscious communion, in treatment, just as much as if we had asked them for help. Now just think of this. This is an idea that came out of Revelation, that if we as spiritual healers could pray for a person or family or group and bring God's life and love into their experience, why couldn't that prayer keep us 24 hours of every day, of every week, of every year in prayer and treatment? And out of it came the spiritual band around the world, which is a spiritual bond uniting us to everyone who has been through class since this idea began. Not quite through everyone, no, because as I said, some have dropped away. Some did not realize what was happening to them. Some did not realize the pearl of great price and turned away. Others have been led away into other teachings, into other books. Some have found a greater sense of peace in other teachings than they found in this. And so it is that all those who have been through our classwork have not caught the vision of what this is, and so are not benefiting, because you cannot benefit from any work, spiritual work, unless you consciously unite yourself with it. In other words, blessings cannot be inflicted upon you. Those who have eyes and do not see, those who have ears and do not hear, cannot partake in the spiritual blessings that surround them. And so it is, everything that takes place in your life must take place consciously. You consciously ask a practitioner for help and thereby open yourself to receive it. You consciously take your child or grandchild into your consciousness of truth, and thereby you benefit them. You consciously take members of your family or patients or students into your consciousness and benefit them. Without consciously doing these things do not happen. If you do not consciously bring yourself to my consciousness, you cannot benefit by my unfolded consciousness. If I do not consciously keep myself united with God, I have no spiritual benediction or blessing to bring to you. If in the lecture work or class work that you have watched in Seattle, if through the writings of the Infinite Way you have found a blessing, it isn't because of me as a person, it is because of my conscious contact with God, and that flows out to you. But you see, I must consciously live in communion with God. You must consciously unite yourself to my consciousness in order to receive the grace of God which flows through me. And that is why you may have members of your family who do not benefit by your studies in truth. And you may wonder, well, the reason is that they will not consciously unite themselves to your consciousness of truth. They're indifferent, they're unenlightened, they're ignorant, and through that they see no value in it, and they hold themselves outside of your consciousness of truth, and they don't benefit. So it is. It would be a wonderful thing if we who catch some little glimpse of truth could walk up and down this world benefiting everybody, but we can't. The Master himself couldn't. When he walked the earth, if you'll notice, those who wanted his help came to him. And they said, Master, Master, will you help me? Master, heal me. They brought themselves to him. And sometimes he wasn't even sure that they could get the benefit of it then, because he wasn't sure that their union with him was sufficiently honest and complete. And so he would say, do you believe that I can do this? And they had to answer yes, and by that very answer they brought themselves into conscious union with his spiritual consciousness. Now, of course, you must remember that had they said, yes, of course I believe that you and this aspirin tablet can help me. Oh, yes, I believe that you and penicillin can help me. You know what the answer would have been? Well, go thy way for the present, and one of these days you'll be awakened and you'll be able to answer, yes, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. It's not quite steady, but I do believe. Then the barriers are down. Union has been made with the Christ consciousness. And then the Master can say, well, what did hinder you? Rise, pick up your bed, and walk. So you see that the secret of spiritual living has to do first with there being those enlightened spiritual states of consciousness on earth that we call practitioners or teachers or leaders or saviors. But their being on earth is only the first part of the bargain. There must also be those on earth to unite themselves to that consciousness in full faith, in full confidence, in complete surrender. Now, a house divided against itself must fall. When you come to God, you must come with complete surrender. You must come with a complete yielding. At first, that is impossible. Everybody on the face of the earth has some religious conviction. Even if that conviction is atheism, it's a religious conviction. I didn't know that. I know it now. That even to be an atheist, one must have a religious conviction. It's a negative sort of conviction, but it's a conviction. Now, when you come to truth, you will discover that many of your beliefs are erroneous. They are erroneous because, in many cases, they are man-made teachings or interpretations of teachings, and just through obedience and ignorance, you accept them. And then as you come to the truth, you get shocked, because you find that some of your most cherished hopes and faiths and beliefs aren't a bit true. Now, some of these you are able to surrender easily, and others you will cling to right up to the last moment. That is why it is that the way of truth isn't easy. What you do must be done consciously, but sometimes it has to be done against your own inner convictions, or against your own faith and your own belief, which you've stored up for years and years and years, and now when you're told it isn't true, you find you can't yield it. And so you continue to cling to the new and to the old. The Master knew that. As a matter of fact, I think you'll find in the study of the Gospels that there isn't anything that's ever been known on earth that he didn't know. There isn't anything that ever took place on earth that isn't mentioned in those short Gospels. And he knew this because he said that you cannot add to a vessel already full. You have to empty yourself of your misconceptions. Now, you know, he spoke dangerously when he said that, because in the life of the Hebrew race in that day, the temple, the synagogue, the Hebrew teachings were very binding on people, and it was a very forceful organization. And what you were told, you had to believe. And what you were told to do, you had to do. And the result was that a fear crept in. If I disobey, maybe I'll go to hell. If I disobey, maybe God won't bless me. If I disobey, God will get angry with me. So forth and so on. And of course, all church teachings foster that sense of superstition. That is why there are rules and penalties for breaking the rules, all based on superstition. So you find that the Master said to the Hebrews, no longer need you worship in holy mountains nor in that temple in Jerusalem. And the shock to them was simply horrifying. Because if ever there was a strict teaching, it was that you had to worship in the synagogues, and not only that, but once a year you had to get to that holy temple in Jerusalem. Your very salvation depended on it. Of course, they were told about fasting and how they would lose the kingdom of heaven if they didn't. And he said nonsense to that. And there were certain foods they couldn't eat. And he said nonsense to that. All of this is superstition. It isn't what goes in the mouth that defileth, that which comes out of consciousness. It isn't whether you worship in a holy mountain or in a holy temple. It's how you worship in the inner sanctuary of your own being. He was breaking. Why, yes, they sacrificed and they tithed. And he said, that isn't necessary. Not for the kingdom of heaven. It may be necessary for your own unfoldment, but it's not necessary for the kingdom of heaven. And he brought the whole antagonism of the world upon himself and was ultimately crucified for exposing these false teachings of churchianity. Now, in that self-same way, you individually, there's no church now that will crucify you for anything, certainly no church at the present time in the United States or Canada or most of the countries of the world. no church that will crucify you for being an independent thinker, but you will crucify yourself. The very moment that you try to take in teachings antagonistic to your previous convictions, you will start to persecute yourself. You will start chasing yourself up alleys to get away from having to face the truth, and then in the final analysis you'll crucify yourself before you'll accept it. That is why it is not easy to be a truth student. It is not easy to be a seeker after God, because in the end you have to drop all of your previous convictions and come to the new day when you discover something very wonderful, that God is in the very midst of you. You discover, if you stay on the path of the infinite way, it's folly to pray God for anything. It's folly to expect anything of God. It's folly to fear God. It's folly to fear that God will ever be displeased with you, whatever you may do. It is folly to believe that you are being punished for your sins, past, present, or future. All of this you have to unlearn. All of this must be purged out of your system, that by going through a process of baptism or communion, that you are any whit nearer God than you were before. Paul exposed all that when he wiped out the deepest religious rite there was in Judaism, that of circumcision. Why, even to this day, circumcision is a tremendous importance in the Hebrew faith. No such thing as a Jew, Reformed or Orthodox, who would even hope to be a Jew without circumcision. And yet, Paul said, circumcision or no circumcision, it all availeth nothing. What takes place as an outer experience is of no value. It's what takes place within. There is an inner circumcision, just as there is an inner baptism and an inner communion. And these are so important that you can't do without them. As a matter of fact, you cannot attain the kingdom of God without realizing them, experiencing them, because they are a part of realization. And that is why all of the church rites and rituals are based on truth. Right from the very fact of ordination, there is such a thing as spiritual ordination. You will read of it in the book Metaphysical Notes under the chapter Ordination, because that was an actual experience of ordination that took place. It wasn't a writing about ordination. It was an actual spiritual ordination that took place. Now, to be ordained of God makes one a minister. But it has no relationship to whether you get a degree or whether you get a black robe. None whatsoever. If the outer physical ordination is not an expression of something that has already taken place as an inner ordination, then the outer ordination is nothing but a costume such as an actor might wear on a stage. Anybody can go on the stage and play the part of a minister. And anybody that fulfills church requirements can go on the church platform and play the part of a minister. But the only ministers on the platform or off are the ministers who have been spiritually ordained by an inner call to divine service. And believe me, there are plenty of them inside the church, but there are also plenty of them outside the church. Being inside the church does not bar anyone from God's call, but being outside the church does not bar anyone, because the church in and of itself isn't the power. The contact or union with God is the power. And so we have laymen, businessmen, serving as ministers who are divinely ordained and who have every right to be doing it. Well, we are going to have to take a few minutes of rest. Oh, where did the time go?